Hi everybody, good morning. It is so nice to see you all and thank you for joining me here today. I'm going to be talking to you about navigating a career in PR and the kind of workplace with a late ADHD diagnosis. I do want to kind of caveat today by saying that I am talking a lot about my experience and other people's experiences with ADHD will be different. It's not going to be exactly the same as what it is for me. There are a lot of factors that go into it, socioeconomic factors, race, gender. There are so many different things that contribute towards someone's diagnosis process, and it is really important that we are all aware and mindful of that. So I guess to give a little bit of a kind of caveat, are we good? Yeah. I just want to kind of like show what it kind of feels like in an everyday scenario. So for me, I went through my whole life basically feeling like I was wearing a pair of shoes that were too small for me. So I would go into the shop, I would get my feet measured, they'd tell me time and time and time again, that is your shoe size. And then one day, someone went to me, no, actually, you needed a bigger size all along. And that is the kind of best way for me to explain what that feels like. Oh, I need to click. There we go. So for anybody in the room that is neurodivergent, I have kind of done a little bit of an overview of what each section is going to cover. And that is just so it basically gives you that kind of oversight in the first instance. So this section, I'm going to be talking about defining ADHD, the iceberg, and masking. There are so many different definitions of ADHD out there, and for me personally, the only one that I have ever really resonated with most is from a lived experience educator. Ellie Middleton is fantastic. She's wrote a book called Unmask, The Ultimate Guide to ADHD, Autism and Neurodivergence, and her definition sums it up better than I ever could and better than anywhere else I've ever read. So that is a neurodevelopmental difference, mainly affecting executive functioning skills, which changes the way that somebody thinks, feels, processes, and behaves. I am going to talk on what executive functioning skills are and how they kind of show up in the workplace a little bit later today. But ultimately, your executive functioning skills is what allows you to do your everyday tasks. And there are kind of three different types of ADHD. So you have your hyperactive type, which is a lot of the time kind of categorized by fidgeting and kind of, being hyperactive. Then you've got your inattentive type, which largely relates to a lack of focus. And then you've also got your combined type, which is the most commonly diagnosed type and also the type that I have, which essentially means that you're a mixture of the two. And then kind of touching on the ADHD iceberg. So a lot of the time with ADHD, as well as many other neurodevelopmental differences, what you see on the surface is merely the peak. There is so much more that you don't see that goes on below the surface. So you might be able to tell that someone is fidgeting, you might be able to tell that they're not really paying attention, but what you don't see is everything else that goes on outside of that. It's the emotional dysregulation, it's the struggles with impulsivity, it's the struggles with finances, it's the lack of sleep. The list goes on and on and on. And one of the reasons that you don't necessarily see that is as a result of masking. So masking is ultimately when a person with ADHD or any other kind of neurodevelopmental difference will behave in a way that society has made them believe that they should. So it's not the right way, but it's basically what society has told them they should do in order to quote unquote fit in. So it's just some kind of examples, I guess, of how I mask. So a lot of the time when I'm in a conversation with someone, naturally my way of showing them that I'm engaged and showing them that I relate to them is by essentially butting into their conversations. My working memory isn't great, so if I've got an anecdote that I want to share, I'll engage with them, I'll get really excited about it, but then society has actually told us that that comes across as rude. So a lot of people will try their best not to do that. Also hiding feelings of overwhelm due to an intense fear of rejection. A lot of people with ADHD also have what is called RSD, which is known as rejection sensitive dysphoria. So my kind of response to rejection and or criticism is very, very, very heightened. And then also being overly early for absolutely everything, so I don't appear incapable. You do not want to know what time I got here this morning. Essentially for me, like a lot of people, again, with ADHD are known as being late. I go the other way, so I am so scared of being late because I think that looks to people like I'm being incapable, so I'm early for absolutely everything. And then kind of touching on and reframing some common misconceptions that focus around ADHD, and just kind of touching on how people can reframe their thinking. Everyone's a little bit ADHD. They're not. For a lot of people, you know, in everyday life, you may encounter some of the characteristics that are associated with ADHD. But having a neurodevelopmental difference is not what everybody has. And it is really important that as a society and as a community, we try to kind of change that narrative. Everyone with ADHD is hyperactive. They're not. Whilst hyperactivity plays a part for some, a lot of the time it can actually be internalized. So I have what is known as a busy brain. So for me, a lot of my kind of like hyperactive side, you're not going to be able to see. It's internal. And also, it is not present for everybody. People with ADHD can't pay attention. Now, the deficit in the name does us absolutely no favors. We can pay attention, we just can't regulate where it goes. And then people with ADHD are lazy. We're not. We just have what is known as an interest-based nervous system. So that basically means that something either needs to have novelty, it needs to have interest, it needs to have challenge, or it needs to have extreme urgency. If it does not have any of those things, it's going to be really difficult for us to get it done. If it has one, fantastic. If it has even more, great. And then women don't have ADHD. We do. It is just less likely to be diagnosed. A lot of ADHD profiling was done on young boys. There is much more research going on into how it affects women, but a lot of the time women present differently, which is why it is missed in childhood and in adulthood too. And then touching on a late diagnosis and what that feels like when you're about to start a new job, because that is what happened to me. So I'm not going to touch too much on what it was like as a child going undiagnosed, but just to give you a little bit of a flavour, this is basically a variety of the things that I've heard on a continuous loop since I was a little girl. So, you know, you're always so messy. If I had £1 for every time I've been called dramatic or sensitive, or that I don't sit still, or that I just need to relax, or that I'm not listening, or that I'm lazy, I've heard these things on a continuous loop. And yet it was still missed. So apologies, the formatting seems to have gone a bit wrong. Just kind of touching on here, I guess, the disparity between ages in diagnosis. So for a lot of people, as I say, like it can be missed. So it can be recognized, and you will see these numbers differ ever so slightly wherever you look, but it can be recognized in children as young as 3. I wasn't diagnosed till I was 27, and a lot of people are not diagnosed until they're 40, 50, even older. Bear with me 1 second, I just need to have a drink. Thank you. And then kind of touching on 2 key dates for me. So the first one being the day that I finally got a new pair of shoes that fit me. So my diagnosis came on the 23rd of October 2022. And boy, was that overwhelming. I mean, initially, you have all of this clarity and you feel like, yes, I know why I do certain things. That makes so much sense. But then you kind of just get ushered out into the world and you have to figure it out for yourself. Which, although feels great in the first instance, then the overwhelm comes in, then the confusion comes in. And then add to it the fact that you're starting a new job a little bit over a week later, and it's just absolute mayhem. which kind of leads me on to how ADHD shows up in the workplace. So I really want to give some kind of practical examples so people can understand what that looks like. But also, whilst I'm going to give some coping techniques and kind of show how you can get colleague support, I also want to touch on how we flourish. Like, yes, ADHD is challenging, that goes without saying, but people with ADHD are also fucking fantastic, if I do say so myself. So I think it's really important to kind of touch on that as well. Sorry if I'm not allowed to swear. There are two key, I hope you take away more than just the two, but there are two kind of key takeaways that I've picked out, I guess. So the first one is all around how essentially we live in a world that has been created with neurotypical brains in mind. But it's really important to recognise that there is often, if not always, more than one way of doing things. And just because it is the way that society has told you does not mean it's the right way for you. So, how kind of ADHD shows up for me in the workplace, but equally without, difficulty remembering information or instructions. So for me, I don't have a great working memory. So if you've told me something verbally, chances are I'm not going to remember it unless I've written it down. So I take my notebook and pen with me absolutely everywhere I go. That is my working memory. If I've not got that with me, or if I've not got my phone, you definitely don't want to see the notes app on my phone, or my laptop, then chances are that's not getting done. But then equally, you can support your ADHD colleagues by making sure that you're just following up with an email or sharing meeting notes. It sounds really, really simple, but honestly, it goes such a long way. Struggling to prioritize work, so I sometimes find it hard knowing what it is that I need to do over one task. So for me, what I now do is I write out my must-complete tasks each day. So that is different from a to-do list. Like a to-do list, I could push that back, I could do it next week. For me, my must-complete tasks are, I write them out every morning. That is what I must get done before the end of the day. And then having a weekly check-in with your manager or whoever it is that you're working with on a project, your colleagues, whoever, that makes a big difference just because you then know what your manager's priorities are, and that allows me to then kind of work off of that as well. I also find it challenging to start or continue tasks. And one of the best things that I have ever done for this is body doubling. So body doubling basically works. You can do it in person with a colleague, or there's also apps that you can download that help you to do it as well if you're working from home. And basically, it is when somebody else, whether they know it or not, is holding you accountable for getting your work done. So one of my colleagues, Ellie, who I sit with a lot in the office, when she's kind of sat at her desk and she's got her headphones in and she's doing her work, I then make that my mission to do what it is that she's doing, behaviour-wise, not the same task necessarily. Or you've got apps that you can follow where you can also do that as well. And then as a kind of colleague or a manager, just make sure you're providing deadlines for each item of work and make sure you're kind of sticking to them as much as you can as well. Being easily distracted. This happens to me quite a lot. So I just make sure if I'm working that I'm allocating deep work time and I'm also turning off my notifications. And I know other people will be able to relate to this whether you're ADHD or not, but you're doing a task, you see a Slack notification come up, it takes your attention, and then before you know it, I've completely forgot what I'm doing. So it's just making sure that I am, muting those notifications and I'm allowing myself the time I need to get that task done. And then again, super simple, but just respect your colleagues' notifications. If they're in deep work, if they're doing something and you know that you probably shouldn't be bothering them right now, but it could be a message that's scheduled, schedule it. It's super quick, it's super easy to do, but then equally, if there's an emergency, then you might not be able to do that. And appearing sensitive to perceived or actual criticism, as I said before, I am very sensitive to what I deem as rejection. So this is something I've struggled with for a long time, but I now actively ask for feedback because if I know that the feedback is coming, it doesn't catch me off guard, doesn't make me spiral, and I feel a lot more comfortable about it. And then also on the flip side, make sure that you're providing feedback not after the fact. So if it's not appropriate to provide the feedback there and then, fine. If there's other people in the room, you have to do it where it feels appropriate, but don't leave it for days. Like, do it in person. It feels so much more natural instead of just kind of doing, have you got a minute? Because the dread. And then having high levels of energy that are really hard to regulate. I take my Tangle with me everywhere I go. That's this little thing here. And it just kind of allows me to refocus my attention. If my hands are feeling really busy and I feel like I am feeling quite fidgety, I have that with me, and it just allows me to then focus on other things that I actually need to focus on. And then just offer alternative ways to run meetings. Meetings don't need to be done behind a desk all the time. Like, go outside, go get a coffee, go somewhere else that's not the kind of office environment. Like, they don't always need to be done in that one kind of environment, provided that the meeting is suitable for that. And then touching on sensory overload. So there's kind of a catch-22 for me in how I experience ADHD, but a lot of the time people will tell you if they're ADHD that they like to work from home. Completely valid, completely fair. For me, my brain struggles to differentiate between home and relaxing and all of the chores I need to do at home. So if I'm at home, there is a lot of distraction for me, but then equally, if I'm in the office, there is a lot of stimuli in an office. And I'm talking you've got people on meetings, you've got music going on, you've got lights that are really bright, you've got the person that's cooking salmon in the microwave, you've got the temperature in an office is never quite right. And for me, if the temperature's off, I'm not focusing, I'm not getting done what I need to get done. And obviously these are things that you may just overlook, so it's just something for everybody to be mindful of when it comes to supporting your neurodivergent colleagues. And then also how we kind of flourish at work and, the value that we really have. If you can't tell by now, I'm a bit of a talker, but that also means I'm great at communication. I'm a natural storyteller. I'm a great motivator in meetings. I'm creative. I bring fresh ideas. I've got quite a unique way of looking at things, which makes me great for risk assessing. I'm very strategic. I solve problems a little bit differently to how others do. And I'm also super passionate, I'm really enthusiastic, and I'm really empathetic as well, which are all absolutely wonderful traits that you should have in your workforce. And then whilst I have kind of touched on, accommodating your neurodivergent employees at different points throughout the talk, I just kind of want to leave you with, 4 takeaways. But I also want to pause for a second. When I was diagnosed, I felt comfortable enough by my employer that I could disclose it. Not everybody has that privilege. Not everybody feels like they can. Not everybody's workplace is open to that. So that is why it's really important to talk about it and to kind of break down the stigmas that surround ADHD, as well as any other neurodevelopmental differences. So, the first one, and it goes without saying, but show empathy and show understanding. I completely get that not everybody will know about ADHD, not everybody will understand it from a lived experience perspective, but you absolutely can show empathy and understanding to your ADHD colleagues. Providing true flexibility as well, and I'm talking about actual flexibility, not flexibility where you have to ask permission. That isn't what flexibility is, and just showing that trust and allowing your colleagues and your staff to get their work done in times that suit them, provided that obviously, yes, it aligns to client meetings or it aligns to what it is that they need to get done, but just allowing them that true flexibility goes a really, really long way. And then, provided you've got the budget, of course, invest in coaching for those that are impacted and also training for the wider business. It is not just on the person with ADHD to knowledge share with everybody else. Everybody has a responsibility to go away and to understand it and to learn more. And then also to create, but also to respect neurodivergent friendly spaces as well. That is really key, making sure kind of where I was talking about the sensory overload, that you are, being mindful of that and supporting your colleagues in the best way that you can. And then one final thing that I want to leave you with before I finish, and we can all go get some tea and coffee, is whilst the word deficit might indicate that people with ADHD are lacking, we are absolutely not. Our brains simply work differently to those that are neurotypical. And that's me, thank you.